The lunar elevator is, in a physical sense, it's a string that's attached to the moon, pulled through the Lagrange point. The Lagrange point is the balancing point, the gravity point between the moon and the Earth. So you pull a string through the Lagrange point towards, but not touching the Earth. Does that make sense? And what happens here is the moon is pretty small, the Earth is a lot bigger, and the gravity gently pulls on the string, keeping the whole system straight. Once you have that, you literally have built yourself a ladder that you can climb up and down to the surface of the moon. What's really important is not really the mechanics of the system, but the use, how it would function, what it would do. Ultimately, you're just talking about a string and a robot climbing back and forth from the surface of the moon out to the Lagrange point. And then you take a rocket to get to and from the Lagrange point back and forth to Earth, and then a robot again. So that's the mechanics of the system, but what that really solves is a problem we've been struggling with for 45 years. This summer marks the 45th anniversary of landing on the moon, and think back to that rocket. The Saturn V rocket was a mind-bogglingly large and incredibly complicated machine that we literally haven't built for more than 40 years. Because we can't build that machine, or we won't build that machine, we can't soft land on the moon. You need a rocket that big in order to land on the moon. And so what our system does is it takes that enormous rocket out of the equation. So instead of having a Saturn-class rocket, there's about more than a dozen nations on the Earth that have about 30 rockets that can go from Earth to the Lagrange point, and then they take our robot back and forth. So what that means is that basically a dozen nations in the world suddenly have access to the moon, where prior to this only 2 nations have ever had access to the moon. So that's a pretty big deal. That's a pretty big deal.